third Evoker spec. There have been a lot of people thinking. Some people have thought it'll be a voidy Shadow Flame. People have thought it'll be a Shadow Flame one. Some other people have thought it'll be an electricity one. This time, though, we have more hints at a third Evoker spec. So, to take a look at these lines then. What do we got?
Deathwing, before he was Deathwing, was giving some directives to his Dracthyr, his loving creations that ended up being out of his control. And he said, "You three shall be the examples all Dracthyr shall follow. Sarkareth, my Devastator," which is, a little bit on the nose, my Devastator, "shall rend your foes with the power of the red and blue dragonflight." That checks out. That happens. Viridia, my Preserver. Again, that's the spec name. There you go. "You shall heal our allies with the graces of green and bronze dragonflights," which again, in-game, happens. But then there's a third. An Emberthal. "You will wield the essence of the black dragonflight to augment all those around you with my power. By my command, kneel and obey." So yeah, there you go. There's your third spec confirmed. It's called probably Augmenter, and I am kind of taking the piss, but this is... You don't put this line in the game. You don't put this line into your PTR even. If you aren't afraid of it going out. If you don't want people to see it. If you don't want people to start thinking. So this specifically then says the essence of the black dragonflight to augment. And you go, augment? That's interesting. That's not something else that's really there. So you go, okay, well, is this them hinting at a support spec? And then there's a book called The Edict of the Adamant Vigil that actually goes a little bit further into it. So you have it here. Blah, 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 blah. "Where our enemies tread, you will find them. Where the armies fly, it will be your guidance that directs their talents. Learn the weaknesses of our foes and amplify the strength of our allies." And then an awful lot of stuff. But it is ultimately, it's Emberthal's people. It's Emberthal's wearing the Adamant Vigil. And you can see here that they're definitely setting up the idea of a third spec. They almost certainly are. However, this is where you get into a bit of a weird one, because World of Warcraft has never had a true support spec. It's had a couple specs that are have parts of that. Even, as an example, PI, Power Infusion, Wind Fury Totem. There's a whole host of stuff like that. It's like, hey, you're going to get a little bit of a buff to your party. You're going to get a little bit of a buff to whatever, a specific person, stuff like that. So you have to wonder, is this actually going to be a third spec? Because you would imagine they would say if they were planning it. But you could also imagine if, Paladin Auras, yeah, that's another good one. It's hard. That's another good one to talk about. So this could be completely bound to lore. This could be purely, this is just for lore. This is just for, this is just something that we're going to put in the game. And Emberthal will be that way, and it will be part of the overarching story. Because if you've done 10.0.7, you'll see that Emberthal isn't, how to put this? Like Viridia, as an example, is very, very soft, very friendly, very, no violence. We have to heal people. We have to even, I guess, our enemies, when they're wounded and stuff, you have to keep them alive. They're very much preserving, protecting. But Emberthal's also resisting that urge to fight, where it's, there's Sarkareth and the vengeance, the blood of my father makes me want to go and kill. But Emberthal doesn't want to do that because oh no, it will be something different. And that maybe even speaks to how they actually are, which is, the supporting stuff. But as to whether this will be a spec in game, there's lots of reasons to believe that. There's lots of hints to believe that. But there's also a whole lot of reasons why it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and it would be a complete nightmare.
Yeah, the hints all point in one direction.
Yeah.
But there's a million reasons not to do it right now. Exactly.
And that's why I'm not sure if this will be is this something they'll maybe weave into the end of the expansion? Because it's
10.2 feature.
It could be a 10.2 feature because they'll, lead up to it now, but they couldn't announce a spec and then
10.1.7 feature.
Could also be that, yeah.
2 months to get used to it.
Yeah,
then it would also not impact the race to world first or all of those other things that they care about.
In the same way as the Red Paladin rework was delayed a little bit, and all the other things they're kind of doing. They're setting up a game that's a little bit more broken up into segments as opposed to going like straight through. So I think it's interesting because I really don't know what a bard-like or a support class would be in World of Warcraft. I really don't see how it could possibly fit into any of the existing design goals. However, I think if they made it, everyone would be like, this is really cool. I like this. Thank you. And it'd be a case of, it's not great. Whatever. People can play it if they want to.
I think you'd have a lot of high ends being very... Yeah, I don't know. I could see a lot of problems from different segments of the player base.
Yeah. Like, Dark Souls says, maybe it's a flavor for a tank that buffs the party and debuffs targets. Yeah. Yeah, buff spec would either be too strong or too weak. But I don't see... the
problem of the disc priest.
Yeah, I think...
Where unless you are... unless you're me, of course, being a 100% parse. Mm-hmm. I'm the best disc priest in the world, actually.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, if somebody whispered me in game and told me that, it's true.
Yeah.
But Disc Priest has a problem. Because Disc Priest does not just, good enough for healer damage, but if Disc Priest, is out-damaging a tank, and also can heal enough like any other healer, then you get into a bit of a problem, don't you? Right? It's like your hybrids... And it's even some of what happened earlier on, right? Remember in Classic WoW when hybrids were more genuine? And sometimes, you were just the buff slave. Sometimes you just didn't exist.
Yeah, because even if you think about it in a way of, okay, you join a group as the Augmenter Evoker, or the Augmentation Evoker, sorry, because they're called Devastation and Preservation. And your abilities, okay, say your abilities are, you're an M+, and your abilities impact one person. Who do you give it to? I don't know. Do you give it to the person highest in the damage meter? No. Oh, you've just designed a spec around needing details to understand how to do your job half correctly.
You do what I do. You PI yourself. You PI yourself so that you get 2 PIs.
That's definitely how Twins of the Sun Priestess works.
Very smart. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
60% haste. Easy.
Yeah. So I think what's wrong with being a buff slave? I think time has kind of oriented people don't really like that very much. It's like even if you look at the...
well, actually, this is the thing. The buff slave would have to be strong enough to justify them being there over a, I guess, realistically, healer or DPS.
Yeah.
In which case, that buff slave has to be pretty fucking impactful.
Yeah, of course.
In which case, is now having a buff slave mandatory? Is it now a role? Because if there's 3.5 roles in the game, with buff slave being the 0.5, but the tuning is such that it is better to have one, then everyone's going to need to have one. And then suddenly, preservation and destruction, it'll be like, no, you need to play that other one. Because it's the 0.5, it's the new hybrid role that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, Dark Soul has a great point where look at how it has to work in FF14. It only works because, a lot of the game makes it work, which is, 8 slots. You've even got, that, because the MMOs are spreadsheets and competitive content has turned them into spreadsheets for most of it to work. And high-end just naturally trickles down into the populace via meta, and there's no way around that, basically. I think, I don't even know if there's a way around that whatsoever. So... that works, but you can see that works in the case of, hey, okay, you've got your party buffs. Oh, well, Dancer's damage is taken down for the impact that they're likely going to have. But that's within damage windows, super narrow. And that's within content that as soon as you're out of the, basically as soon as you're out of, I would say, Savage rating and Ultimate rating, they don't really give a shit what numbers look like. So they have this really narrow window of doing everything right. But in World of Warcraft, it's this is bad in Raid, but good in M+. And everyone's like, this is broken, this is a nightmare. Awful. You don't want that. It's such a harder job to do.
Their infinite problem of, how does Disc Priest be okay in Raid, but also be okay in M+? Right now, there's only... proportionately... there's actually, our guild actually has all of the EU disc priests other than Taliesin. Just to say though,
Need to get in there.
I know it sure really confuses me though. Like I appear in my priest and I do really well, and our guild's fine, and I heal. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, hang on a second, I'm doing good damage. This isn't too hard to play. This is super fun. It's great. I'd play this over Holy any day of the week. And then I look at like sub creation. There's no disc priests.
Yeah, none of them.
Actually, let me head over to sub creation.
Disc priests have the worst representation among healers by a substantial margin, because it isn't cool in the way the rest of them are, and it's more annoying to play. But also, it's just got a bit of a whoopsie to it.
So here's the thing. Actually,
yeah.
Now, this says something about sub creation too, and I think it's So we'll hop over to my screen. All right. 8 here.
Yeah.
Happy. But here's the thing. This week, based on 3,000 runs.
21 to 28.
21 to 28.
Basically irrelevant for most
players. Look at 166.
Yeah.
I'm fairly sure that
if you go to Raider.io, you'll see the comparative ones.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you'll be able to see like over representation across a whole bunch of shows and different things. So it's like, I think, so people are pointing out that, you know, the support ones in 14 are like their own DPS jobs and just have that as an added layer. And that's a thing where you're sitting going, well, okay, well, then it's just a DPS spec with buffs. And how do you make sure the buffs are enough to line up to, you know, to make up the rest of that DPS? And over in F14 land, you can go, well, this is a much narrower Windwolf design, so you can roughly account for that handily enough. But if you take that into raid and they go, okay, well, you're buffing the whole raid, how does that work? Okay, I don't know. Versus buffing group. Oh, do you go into raid and you buff a party? It's like, oh, well, now someone has to go, which group's the augmenter in? I need to shuffle this around all the time. And it's like, these are all very kind of minor problems, I think. But there are enough problems that you go, would adding this be worth the amount of problems we would cause and the amount of extra stuff we need to do? Because you can imagine complete bullshit happening of, right, we're going to run, you know, what's the best way to do this mythic raid? Assuming buffs stack, because they have to stack, otherwise you not have two people in like a group, if it's most of what they do, versus having two battle shouts. It's like, okay, well, most of what you do is buffs and debuffs, so they have to stack. And then it turns out like, okay, sweet. We have designed the perfect group. We have the highest DPS class or spec currently in the game. They are geared to the tits. Say it's an arms warrior on an execute fight. We have got the perfect raid for this mythic fight for this boss is got some tanks, we've got some healers, and we have one arms warrior with a what's it called, the fatality, the mark of fatality, I think that's what it is, the big execute. And we have every other DPS slot is occupied by an augmenter to funnel buffs into them so they can take the boss from 35 to dead with one execute. That's the stuff that you can like imagine kind of having to figure it out. Or like, well, you either have a place or you don't, because it's kind of binary in that sense when you are impacted. And then there's the other problem of, okay, well, how much damage do you do? I do X damage plus, you know, at Y percentage of what my party member does. It's like, oh, you're in a shit group. Your damage is nerfed because you don't have anyone good in your group.
I like an idea.
That's frustrating.
Sebastian. Make it be the opposite of disc. So I guess it's like, because you're a Black Dragonflight themed evoker, it's as if, you know, you can like take those tanky hits and then redistribute it with health.
Maybe.
Or maybe turn it into damage if Blizzard wanted to make a more Vengeance Demon Hunter.
No, but sorry,
at least that was like supposed to be, you know, their like fantasy.
Yeah, sorry, I literally heard you say Vengeance at my fucking, just like, you know.
Oh God, not Vengeance.
Yeah, you know the like videos of like neuron pathways lighting up. That just happened in my head. I mean, it's like Vengeance. give us a vengeance tank, please, and then it'll be the only tank ever played. But yes.
If you're confused with that, basically, there was a time where tanks did more damage when they took more damage, so tanks could just do absurd DPS by standing in the fire.
I absolutely had the time of my life on playing a Blood DK on the Corkron Annihilator in Siege of Orgrimmar in either normal or heroic, and I was such an asshole. I was literally going as hard as I could around, trying to pop every single mine just so I could be on top of the damage. And then the other tank started stealing my mines because they noticed what I was doing and wanted to do the same. And that was the most fun I've ever had tanking. That was fantastic. I miss Vengeance. I miss Vengeance so bad. But it probably should stay gone. Especially when people use it with a Brewmaster to destroy Lich Yen. Oh, good times.